What would you think if I told you that some women are mirrors so clear, they make a man see the parts of himself he spent his entire life running from? These are not ordinary women. They do not seduce with charm or beauty alone, though they may possess both. Their presence carries a gravity that shifts the air in the room. Something about them feels ancient, unshakable. They do not beg, plead, or chase. They observe. They feel deeply, but they no longer bleed for the unready. These are women who have walked through their own darkness and come out with wild grace in their eyes. A man feels it before he can name it. A subtle tension in his chest. A strange heat under his skin. He is drawn to her but also unsettled. He cannot quite place why, because she does not flatter his ego. She does not laugh at his hollow bravado. She sees straight through it. Not with cruelty but with clarity. She is not impressed by his money, his confidence, or the mask he wears. She is reading something older, his emotional architecture, the hidden scaffolding of his unresolved pain. And that terrifies him. Because when a woman has done shadow work, she no longer looks to others to validate her worth. She has sat with her wounds. She has kissed her own shame. She has dragged her projections out into the light and asked them hard questions. The kind that burn and heal and burn again. She knows what it's like to live with ghosts and choose to feed her soul instead of her patterns. To a man still ruled by his own unconscious, this kind of woman feels dangerous. Not because she hurts him, but because she reveals him. In her presence, he feels seen in a way he's never quite known. Not just for who he wants to be, but for who he really is beneath the curated persona. The lost boy. The frightened animal. The one who has never grieved the father who didn't stay. The one who still carries resentment toward the mother who overgave and underloved. Most men spend years, lifetimes, avoiding this inner confrontation. The ego builds its empire around escape, achievement, distraction, power, control. But none of that holds in front of a woman who has faced her own abyss. Her silence is not passive. It's sacred. It demands presence. It disarms the game. And when she says nothing, he hears everything. She becomes a quiet oracle of his undone work. Carl Jung taught that we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is what she has done. And so, her femininity is not soft in the way the world teaches. It is not palatable, pleasing, or predictable. It is full spectrum. It is both moonlight and wildfire. She can hold space for your pain without absorbing it. She can desire you without needing to possess you. She can love you, and walk away if she must. To the unaware man she is frustrating, even maddening. He will call her cold because she doesn't collapse into him. He will accuse her of being distant too much in her masculine, because she will not perform softness to appease his insecurity. But what he truly feels is something far more profound, the raw ache of recognition. The unspoken question, why can't I forget her? He can't forget her because she made him remember himself. This woman does not compete. She does not betray her own intuition for the comfort of attachment. She has tasted loneliness and transmuted it into solitude. She no longer runs from pain, she converses with it. And that makes her magnetic. Not the kind of magnetism that fades when beauty withers, but the kind that reaches down into the marrow of a man's psyche and whispers, there is more to you than this. You who are watching, you might be becoming this woman. Or perhaps you already are. And if so, you've likely noticed it. The way men linger around your energy, unsure of what they're drawn to. The way they try to control, fix, or tame you. The way they seem both attracted and intimidated, compelled yet confused. It's because you're no longer playing by the rules of the wounded feminine. You've stepped outside the loop. You've dismantled the false self, the one that begged for crumbs in exchange for performance. And now, your presence is a challenge to the collective male unconscious. Because here is the truth, men are not only drawn to women who reflect their desire. They are equally, if not more, drawn to women who reflect their shadow. The woman who awakens him isn't always the softest one. Sometimes she's the one who simply won't play small. The woman who knows how to hold herself in silence becomes the woman he cannot silence in his memory. He may try to rationalize it. He may tell himself it was just timing or chemistry or the thrill of the unknown. But underneath all that, there's a quieter truth unraveling him. He met a woman who wasn't afraid of her own shadow, and now he cannot unknow her. Because something changes in a man when he feels the presence of integrated feminine power. Not the performative kind that plays to his preferences, but the grounded, inward-facing kind that radiates from a woman who no longer fears rejection, abandonment, or solitude. A woman like that doesn't need to be loud. Her stillness alone carries the weight of ancient knowing. Her gaze feels like it's speaking to a part of him that has no words, only memories, forgotten dreams, unresolved grief, repressed rage. Around her, his performance starts to falter. The charm he's relied on for years lands hollow. His cleverness feels small. His strategies, the push and pull, the dominance, the casual emotional withholding, they lose their power. What? Because she's not playing his game. She's not afraid to lose him. She doesn't orbit his attention like it's the sun. She's already found the light within herself. Men, consciously or not, recognize this shift, and it terrifies them. But they're also hungry for it. Because when a man is in the presence of a woman who has done her inner work, she opens a portal in him, not just to desire, but to truth, to face himself, to strip away the masks if only for a moment. And the irony is, while he may chase after the women who validate his surface, it is the one who sees his depth that truly haunts him. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That is the psychic undercurrent of what happens here. When he feels seen by her, deeply, nakedly, archetypally seen, he begins to feel the weight of his own disconnection. From himself. From his emotions. From his childhood wounds. From the unlived life he's buried under performance. And suddenly, her presence becomes a confrontation. Not because she is aggressive. Not because she is unkind. But because she is sovereign. And nothing disrupts the ego of a man more than a woman who refuses to collapse into his emptiness. She doesn't demand that he be healed. She simply refuses to bleed for his delay. You see, most women have been taught to love by abandoning themselves, to compromise, to over-explain, to fix and please and apologize for their needs. But this kind of woman, she no longer bargains with her integrity. She has moved through the fire of heartbreak, betrayal, and self-loss. And she has emerged not bitter, but reborn. Soft but unyielding. Open but no longer available to men who cannot meet her soul. So when a man meets her, the part of him still searching for a mother, for someone to tend to his wound without asking him to grow, begins to fracture. He wants her. But to have her, he must rise. And rising requires him to face his own shadows. His fear of intimacy, his hidden shame, his emotional laziness, his unchecked entitlement. She is not the woman who will carry these for him. She will not shrink so that he can feel tall. And for the man not yet ready, that's unbearable. So he may run. Ghost her. Say she's too much. Tell her she's too intense, too spiritual, too serious. He may try to find easier women, ones who reflect only his light, who ask for less, who stay impressed. But deep down the imprint remains. He remembers the way she held his gaze like it was a mirror. He remembers the feeling of being unmasked, of being felt, not just touched. And that memory will follow him into every relationship after. You, if you are this woman, must know this. That your presence is not meant for everyone. That your depth is not rejection-proof. That being awake in a world of half-asleep hearts is not always a blessing. But it is real. And that reality is rare. It makes men uncomfortable. But the right man, the man doing his own shadow work, walking his own path toward wholeness, he won't just be drawn to you. He'll recognize you. Because in the end, a woman who has met her own darkness becomes the map to a man's light. There is a certain stillness that lives in the heart of a woman who has danced with her demons and refused to let them devour her. A stillness not born of apathy or distance, but of hard-won presence. The kind that can sit with chaos and remain unmoved, the kind that can watch someone unravel and not reach to fix them. She has become a sanctuary not by building walls, but by learning that her peace is sacred, and not everyone deserves access. Men feel this. Not with the mind but with something deeper, a cellular knowing, a visceral awareness. When they encounter such a woman, they feel a shift in the atmosphere, as though something has cracked open inside them that can't be closed again. It's not just about attraction. It's not even about love. It's about remembrance. She evokes something primal, ancient, and tender. She awakens the parts of them they forgot how to feel. She does not demand that they change, but her energy makes it impossible for them to remain the same. Because this kind of woman doesn't settle for emotional crumbs. She has known starvation, yes, the kind that comes from seeking love in places that only ever mirrored her wounds back to her. She has loved while being unseen. She has given while being emptied. She has begged the unready to hold her heart. And it broke her. But in that breaking she found gold, the golden shadow as Jung called it. The power, the sovereignty, the rage, the wisdom that was never truly lost, only buried beneath the fear of abandonment. Now that fear no longer rules her. She has befriended it. Sat in the stillness when no one called. Walked alone under a sky of silence and learned to hear the voice within. And that makes her immune to the manipulations that once controlled her, the hot and cold affection, the future faking, the push-pull dance of ego-driven men. She is no longer baited by breadcrumbs. She waits for substance, and until then she feeds herself. To the man who is still entangled in his own avoidance, this is disarming. The usual tools no longer work. She doesn't react when he tests her. She doesn't chase when he withdraws. She doesn't perform when he withdraws affection. She simply witnesses. And that kind of presence is unbearable to a man who is not yet ready to be seen without his mask. She is, quite literally, holding space for his initiation, but without coddling, without hand-holding, without sacrificing herself in the process. This is where the discomfort begins, where his nervous system starts to rebel. He may feel anger rise, accusations of coldness, of being too detached, too indifferent. But that is projection. That is the little boy inside him, screaming at the woman who will no longer abandon herself to love him. You see, a man must choose to meet her in his own mirror. She cannot walk into it for him. And if he does, if he dares to confront his own shadows, his inherited stories, his suppressed grief, then something extraordinary happens. He begins to awaken into his masculine soul. Not the distorted masculinity that seeks to conquer, possess, or dominate, but the sacred masculine, the one that protects without controlling, that leads without wounding, that desires without draining. And in the presence of a woman who has done her inner work, that awakening is not only possible, it is inevitable. Because when the feminine is fully embodied, she becomes a catalyst. She carries within her the paradox of fire and water. She will hold your gaze like a flame and drown your illusions like the tide. She does not soothe the ego. She summons the soul. And most men have never known love like that. They've known validation. They've known dependency. They've known lust dressed up as connection. But few have encountered a woman who sees their pain and does not run, who feels their chaos and does not collapse, who honors their wounds and still refuses to carry them. This woman is not a fantasy. She is not an ideal. She is real and she is rare. And the man who loses her will feel it. Not in the moment, perhaps. Not while his pride still shields him. But eventually, in the quiet spaces where memory lives. He will remember how her silence held more truth than 1,000 words. He will recall the way her eyes didn't ask for love, but reflected it. He will look into the faces of other women and see fragments, but never the whole. Because once you've stood in the presence of the embodied feminine, you can never go back to sleep. There are things a man cannot unsee once he's met a woman who has walked through her own underworld and returned whole. Not perfect but whole. Integrated. She no longer lives split between who she is and who she's expected to be. And that kind of woman does not leave a man's memory gently. She is the feminine archetype reborn from the ashes of her own unraveling. No longer the martyr, no longer the maiden, no longer the pleaser or the prisoner. She is the lover who does not cling, the mystic who does not convert, the healer who does not sacrifice her soul to fix broken things. She has learned that her worth does not lie in being chosen. It lies in choosing herself over and over again. Around her, a man is exposed to a sacred dissonance, the ache between his current self and his highest potential. He may not yet have language for it, but he feels it, in his bones, in his breath, in the way his heart starts to beat differently in her presence. She doesn't need to say a word. Her energy speaks in symbols. I have met myself, now you must meet you. And that's the difference. Other women may trigger desire, but this woman triggers awakening. In the mythology of the soul, the feminine is not just softness and light. She is Kali as much as she is Aphrodite. She is the storm and the stillness. She is the velvet-covered mirror that reflects back every truth a man has buried beneath bravado. And it is precisely because she no longer fears her own shadow that she can hold his, without judgment, without collapse, without compromise. But he must feel it to transform. He must sit in the tremble of being seen, not praised, not pursued, not pedestaled, but truly seen. Seen in his fear, his fragility, his emotional hunger, his unspoken longing to be free, not only from society's expectations of masculinity, but from the prison of his own detachment. She feels like danger to the ego because she offers no room to hide. And this is where so many men fall. Not because she was too much, but because she was the first woman who asked for everything without asking at all. Her energy alone said, "Show me the man behind the mask. Or don't. But know that I will not stay for anything less." This is not cruelty. This is spiritual discernment. She is no longer willing to play lover to a man's wounds. She is no longer interested in potential over presence. She has heard every apology, watched every cycle repeat, loved every lost boy into a man who refused to rise. No more. She no longer sets herself on fire to keep another warm. Her love now burns inward, into devotion, creativity, truth. And that makes her powerful beyond words. Because now she carries the wisdom of her own survival. And a woman who has survived herself, her patterns, her addictions, her betrayals, her longing, is a woman who no longer fears the silence of being alone. She chooses solitude when connection demands her self-abandonment. She chooses integrity over intensity. And in doing so, she becomes a living initiation, a rite of passage for the masculine. Some men will run from her. Not because she's wrong for them, but because she asks them to become whole, and they're still addicted to fragments. Others will attempt to possess her, confuse her depth with mystery they believe they can conquer. But she cannot be held in shallow waters. She does not bloom in false intimacy. She requires emotional intelligence, not performance. Depth, not dramatics. Presence, not pretense. The man who is not ready will call her complicated. The man who is halfway there will try to fix or label her. But the man who has also done his own work, the one who has faced his own shadows, confronted his father wounds, burned the mask, he will not be intimidated by her power. He will be called by it. Because a woman who has done her shadow work is not looking to be saved or completed. She is looking to be met, fully, honestly, vulnerably. Not as a man who wants to impress her, but as a man who wants to meet himself in her presence and grow. That kind of woman changes the lives of men. Not because she tries to, but because she has become an embodiment of what the feminine truly is. Not weakness, not submission, not decoration, but soul. She is the echo of everything he's forgotten, and everything he still longs to become. In her presence, time stretches. Something slows. The nervous tension in a man's body begins to pulse differently, not from excitement but from confrontation. Not with her but with himself. She asks no questions aloud, yet her silence interrogates his being. Are you who you say you are? Or just the mask you've learned to wear? It's not her beauty that makes her unforgettable, it's her clarity. She does not offer illusions. She does not flirt with fantasy. She lives in the sharp, bright edge of reality. And that is where real attraction, not lust but soul attraction, is forged. In the space where illusions fall and authenticity rises. This kind of woman, forged in the fires of her own becoming, radiates something men cannot fake and cannot replicate: emotional integrity. She speaks without ornament. She listens without agenda. She walks through the world with a knowing that is ancient and grounded. It is the knowing that she has nothing to prove. And this unnerves men who rely on being needed. Because if she does not need them, how will they know they matter? It's here in this question that a man stands at a crossroads. He can shrink, retreat, seek out another woman who will pedestal his ego and let him remain half alive. Or, he can step toward the discomfort, the raw honesty, the terrifying invitation of her presence, to evolve. Jung taught that the anima, the feminine aspect within every man, is not merely a romantic ideal. She is a guide, a mirror, a threshold. She calls him into union with himself. But this inner journey cannot be traveled through fantasy or projection. It requires a woman who has called her own soul back from exile. A woman who no longer performs for love. She is no longer a reflection of what he wants. She is a reflection of what he needs to face. And that truth awakens fear. Fear that he isn't enough. Fear that if he is fully seen he will be unworthy. Fear that her stillness means rejection, when in fact it is simply self-containment. Her silence is not punishment. It is the sound of a woman who has stopped negotiating with her dignity. She no longer believes love must hurt. That desire must be earned. That wholeness must wait for someone to choose her. She chose herself. And because of that, she no longer confuses presence with possession. She understands how to hold space without grasping. How to love without losing herself. How to walk away not out of anger, but out of reverence for her own soul. And that kind of detachment, that spiritual sovereignty, is what makes men ache for her long after she's gone. Not because she manipulated, but because she didn't. She didn't try to control the outcome. She didn't make herself smaller. She didn't explain her standards or beg to be understood. She simply existed in her truth and let it echo. And that echo? It lives inside a man long after the physical closeness fades. He may touch other bodies. But her energy, the weight of her awareness, the grace of her detachment, the fire of her knowing, it lingers. He may try to forget, to override it with noise. But his soul remembers. She is not the storm. She is the eye within it. That calm. That unshakable presence. That capacity to feel everything without being ruled by it. That is the gift of a woman who has done her shadow work. And while some men may find it overwhelming, others, the rare ones, will see it as what it truly is, an invitation. An invitation to rise. To meet her not with domination, not with pretense, but with reverence. With stillness. With truth. Not the polished truth, the vulnerable one. The wounded one. The truth of a man who has stopped trying to be admired and has started learning how to be real. In that space, between two people who have each made the descent into their own shadow, something holy happens. The false selves fall away. The old wounds begin to breathe. And the relationship becomes not a performance, but a ritual of evolution. Two souls, neither leaning nor pulling, neither hiding nor rescuing, just meeting raw and whole and present. And in that rare moment, the man no longer sees her as dangerous. He sees her as the sacred key. To the door he's always longed to open, the one that leads back to himself. He will think of her in moments he cannot explain, when the noise fades, when the laughter quiets, when he lays next to someone whose touch doesn't reach his soul. He will remember how she made silence feel like a sanctuary, not a void. How she didn't need to be filled, fixed, or saved, how she simply was, and that was enough to shake him. Because he wasn't just attracted to her. He was unmade by her. And this is what most never understand about feminine power born from shadow work. It doesn't seduce, it reveals. It doesn't flatter, it clarifies. The woman who has done her work will not tell you what you want to hear. Her presence shows you who you are and who you are not yet. To the ego this is intolerable. To the soul it is medicine. And some men, perhaps many, will spit that medicine out. They will call her names. Cold, crazy, difficult. They will demonize what they do not have the courage to understand. Because it is far easier to label the light that exposes your darkness than to actually look into it. But some men, some will finally stop running. They will remember her not just as a woman but as a mirror. Not of perfection but of possibility. The woman who didn't try to hold him together, but let him see where he was broken, and offered no shame in the seeing. That is what makes her unforgettable. Not the way she touched him but the way she allowed him to touch himself. Emotionally, spiritually, fully. Because she didn't collapse to keep him comfortable. She stood. She witnessed. She allowed him to tremble. And in doing so she gave him the rarest gift, the opportunity to become. This is not the love story the world sells. This is not the romance of possession, sacrifice, or fantasy. This is the romance of truth. Of awakening. Of shedding the armor, even if your skin isn't ready for the wind. Around this kind of woman, a man learns what it means to be exposed and not diminished. To be vulnerable and not disrespected. To be fallible, emotional, human, and still held in sacred regard. But only if he's done, or is willing to begin, the work. Only if he's willing to enter the underworld of his own psyche. To sit with his unmet grief. To trace the origin of his anger, not just unleash it. To question the stories he inherited about masculinity, and the parts of himself he exiled to fit those roles. The woman who has done her shadow work is not interested in a half-present man. She has no time for the ones who wear their trauma like armor and expect her to fight her way inside. She no longer finds excitement in chaos. She no longer mistakes pain for passion. She has peace now, and peace has a frequency that doesn't tolerate disorder. And so she waits, not in longing but in power. Not for a man to save her. Not for one to complete her. But for the man who sees her not as a conquest, not as a concept, but as a mirror of his own depth. A man who doesn't fear her silence, because he has sat in his own. A man who doesn't run from her darkness, because he has touched his own. Together they do not build a fantasy. They forge a temple. A temple where both are seen, not as saviors or victims, but as sovereign beings walking side by side. They do not merge to escape themselves. They unite because they have already met their own souls, and now choose to meet each other whole. This is the future of love. Not built on dependency, but on depth. Not built on performance, but on presence. Not chasing, not running, just choosing. Again and again in truth. So let the men feel uneasy around her. Let them speak her name with longing they cannot articulate. Let them remember how it felt to be exposed to something real. And let her stay soft and wild and untamed, because she is not here to be understood by those who have not yet met themselves. She is here to awaken, to disrupt, to liberate. And in doing so she leaves behind not regret, but remembrance. The remembrance of what love could be, if only we had the courage to let it strip us bare. At last, the journey converges where all true transformation does. Not in possession, not in validation, but in the quiet, devastating power of letting go. Because a woman who has done her shadow work does not cling, even to the one she loves. She has learned through aching trial that attachment without self-respect is bondage. She has given herself away before, in the name of love, in the name of healing, in the desperate hope that someone might finally stay. And when they didn't, she broke. But she broke open, not down. Now she knows, if love costs her herself, it is not love. If closeness asks her to abandon her own center, it is not intimacy. If desire demands her silence, it is not sacred. She no longer wants the man who finds her intriguing but can't meet her in depth. She no longer waits for the one who loves her light but flees from her fire. She lets them go, not with bitterness, not with rage, but with reverence. Because some men are meant only to glimpse her, not hold her. And still, they will never forget her. She doesn't haunt because she played games or made promises. She haunts because she made him feel. Not excitement. Not lust. But something far more dangerous, truth. The truth of who he could be. The truth of what connection could feel like if he were fully present. The truth that there is no hiding when faced with a woman who has already met her shadow, and stayed. It was never about control. It was never about power. It was always about resonance. She offered herself as she was, not polished, not perfect, but true. And in a world that profits from pretending, a soul like hers is both a balm and a blade. She soothes. She exposes. She leaves no room for the small self to thrive. And so, the man who has not yet done his own work will feel both drawn and repelled. He may try to possess her, or punish her, or project his fears onto her. But in time, when the chaos settles and the masks fall, he will see it for what it was. A rare and sacred chance to rise. Not for her, but for himself. That is her power. She does not demand he ascend. She simply exists at a level where only the ascended can breathe. Where ego dies and soul awakens. Where love is not performance but presence. Not security but transcendence. And you, if you are this woman, you must never forget what it took to become her. The nights you cried in silence. The voices you silenced to hear your own. The patterns you broke through blood and bone. The people you released though your heart begged to hold on. The 1,000 little deaths. The slow rebirths. You did not come this far to dim again. Your power is not in your softness alone but in your wholeness. The way you hold your light and your shadow in the same breath. The way you can cry without losing your clarity. The way you can desire someone, and still walk away when your soul says no more. That is the feminine evolved. No longer seeking completion but offering invitation. No longer begging to be loved but radiating love as a frequency. No longer performing to be chosen but choosing herself, even when it's lonely, even when it's misunderstood. Because she knows, true union can only come through truth. And if a man cannot meet her there, he is not her loss. He is his own. So let him feel what he must. Let him wrestle with the echo she left behind. Let him meet her again years later in the still eyes of a stranger. In the scent of jasmine on a warm night. In a poem he stumbles across that feels like her voice. She is gone. But she awakens something in him. A crack in the armor. A question that will never stop asking. What if I had risen? And that is her legacy. Not to be remembered for how she made them chase. But for how she made them feel. The sacred burn of truth, the memory of a woman who didn't just love, but revealed. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.